Paul was speaking in Hebrew. How many of you have the NIV? The NIV, when it says in the Greek, Hebraisti, they translate that as Aramaic. So the NIV and some other translations I don't remember, they take that Greek word Hebraisti and translate it into Aramaic. Now the Greek word for Aramaic is Syristi, Syria. Aramaic and Syria are one and the same thing. That's a bad translation if you ever see Aramaic in there, because the Greek word is Hebraisti, which is Hebrew. That's in the Greek text. He was speaking Hebrew. John 19:19-20. Pilate also wrote a title and put it on the cross. Remember that sign that was put up there? It read, Yeshua, or Jesus of Nazareth, the King of the Jews. Many of the Jews read this title, for the place where Jesus was crucified was near the city, and it was written in Hebrew, Latin, and Greek. What happened to Aramaic? There's no Aramaic there. Why? Because that's not the language they were speaking. You wanted to make sure that the Romans and the Greeks read it and the Jews read it. That's all you were concerned with when they put that sign up there. So Aramaic was not, according to this verse, was not the language that the Jews were speaking at that time. Matthew 3:9. And do not presume to say to yourselves, we have Abraham as our father, for I tell you, God is able from these stones to raise up children to Abraham. For those of you that have been learning Hebraic thought, Hebraic writings, maybe learn a little bit of Hebrew, you've come across this idea of Hebrew poetry, Hebrew puns, parallelisms. These are common throughout the Tanakh. They're all over the place. The Hebrew likes to make word puns. For example, we would say, the artist painted the canvas. We would not say, the painter painted the painting. You don't hear us talk like that, do you? You know, we try and avoid those type of sentences. But not Hebrew. Hebrew would continue it, the painter painted the painting. They love those word plays. They do it all the time. You find them throughout the Tanakh. Guess what if you take the Hebrew New Testament and translate it into Hebrew? Guess what you find? Word puns everywhere in the text. They're all over the place. This is one of them. One of many of them. Can't see it in the English. You can't see it in the Greek. Only in the Hebrew. The Hebrew for the word stone is even, or eben. In the plural, ebenim, or ebenim. That's stones. Children in Hebrew is benim. You hear that? Ebenim, benim. He's just simply doing a word pun here. That's just the way they talk. This is just one small evidence that this was originally spoken in Hebrew. Matthew 15:35-37. And commanding the crowd to sit down on the ground, he took the 7 loaves of the fish, and having given thanks, he broke them and gave them to the disciples, and the disciples gave them to the crowds, and they all ate and were satisfied. Here, I'm going to read this again, but I'm going to replace it with Hebrew translations from the Greek. See if you can hear it. And commanding the crowd to yashav on the esev, he took the shabah loaves and the fish, and having given thanks, he shavat them and gave them to the disciples, and the disciples gave them to the crowds, and they all ate and were sabah and shabah 7 sayas. Can you hear that? My gosh, that's not coincidence. These words were originally written in Hebrew because we can see all of these puns there. Mark 3:9, and he said, the kingdom of God is as if a man should scatter seed upon the ground. And he said, the kingdom of God is as if an Adam should scatter seed upon the Adamah. Here we have zerah and zerah. Zerah is the verb meaning to scatter. Zerah is the word for seed. Again, another pun popping up out of the... Oh, and also Adam is man. Adamah is ground. They're all over the place in there. 2 things to recognize here. First of all, this is from the book of Mark. Secondly, it uses the phrase kingdom of God. Malkut Elohim. Is this talking about the kingdom of which belongs to God, Elohim? Would you agree with that? That this is the kingdom that belongs to God? Yes or no? By the way, this one isn't a trick question. For those who have been here the last 2 days, see, that's why everybody's so hesitant here. They're like, you're not going to trap me on that one. Okay, that one wasn't a trick question. Yes, it's talking about God's kingdom. It belongs to Him. It's His. But this is the beginning of a parable. The kingdom of God is as if a man should scatter seed upon the ground. This is one of his parables. This very same parable is found in the book of Matthew. In Matthew it says, another parable set he before them, saying, the kingdom of heaven, Malkut HaShemayim, is like unto a grain of mustard seed, which a man took and sowed in his field. In Luke, this same verse reads, he said therefore, unto what is the kingdom of God like? And whereunto shall I liken it? It is also like unto a grain of mustard seed, which a man took and cast into his own garden. It's the same parable, one parable, but recorded by two individuals. However, the difference is that Matthew records it as the kingdom of heaven, whereas Mark, or Luke, is recording it as the kingdom of God. Why the difference? Because for one thing, we know that Matthew was written to the Hebrews, to the Jewish people. And in Judaism, do you say Elohim? Yes, you do. But let's go back 2,000 years, they did not. Just like the name Yahweh, do Jews pronounce the name Yahweh? No, what do they say instead? Hashem. They did the same thing with Elohim. They would not say Elohim. They would use a euphemism. Adonai is a euphemism of the name Yahweh. One of the euphemisms used in the first century by the Jews is the word Shemayim, heaven. So Luke, is probably giving his letter to people who don't really understand Hebraic thought very well. So he has to take what Yeshua said, because Yeshua was speaking in a Hebrew. He said, kingdom of heaven. He used the euphemism. But Mark, knowing that his readers aren't going to understand that, he translates the euphemism into what he meant, the kingdom of God. So how many of you heard that the kingdom of heaven is a place? It's not. It's the kingdom of God. It's the kingdom of a person, not a place. But the point here is that Luke, in the Greek text, we see that he is writing possibly, or maybe originally in Greek, although I doubt it, but it's possible. But he's reading to people who aren't familiar with Hebraic thought. But Matthew is definitely writing to Hebrew people in Hebrew. John 14:6, I am the way, the truth, and the life. We were just talking about this earlier out in the hall there. No one comes to the Father but by me. What to recognize here is this is what's called a parallelism. We don't recognize them because we don't know what they are. Well, let me tell you what they are, because you're going to start seeing them now everywhere. Believe me. Once you understand the concept of a parallelism, you're going, oh, that's a parallelism, because they're everywhere in the Bible. A parallelism is simply saying one thing two different ways. The road is long and the way is far. Okay, that's common in the Hebrew Bible, of hearing things like that. The lamp unto my feet and the light unto my path. It's a parallelism. There's also opposites. And I used an example in one of my other slides before, the other day, is the righteous do this and the wicked do that. Okay, this is an opposite parallelism, making opposites. These are everywhere in the Tanakh, from Genesis all the way to 2 Chronicles. And guess what? They're all over the New Testament too. The New Testament in one place says that all of his disciples and the multitude came to him. Now, the way we interpret that is that his 12 disciples came to him, and also a big crowd of people. That's not what it means because of the Hebrew parallelism there. It's saying there was a whole crowd of disciples, a whole multitude of disciples. But we miss that because we don't understand Hebrew poetry. This here, I am the way, the truth, and the life, is a Hebrew parallelism. It's saying one thing three different ways. It's also common to triple it, to say the same thing. All of these are synonyms in Hebraic thought. They mean the same concepts. Here we have Matthew 4:24.